All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Blair Patterson, and today I'm going to be talking about bullying intervention in the school environment. Originally, when I was looking at bullying and starting my research, there were so many different topics, but I really wanted to focus today on bullying intervention and kind of the pros and cons of intervening in a bullying situation when in the classroom or in the school in general. The first thing I want to talk about is kind of bullying in general. And first off, that it's an issue across the nation. It can be seen in almost every school across the United States, regardless of age level or school type. It's there kind of no matter what when we have kids involved. So, bullying can be formally defined as an imbalance of power between the bully and the bully's victim, or as aggressive actions by someone with greater power toward a weaker target. So, what that means is when we have a situation of bullying, we kind of have an aspect where we have like a conflict of power, where usually you have somebody who has more power over a weaker victim, or something like that. It has to do with like an imbalance of power. And bullying is pretty prevalent. So, school bullying statistics in the United States show that about 1 in every 4 kids in the US are bullied on a regular basis. And this is any form of bullying a part of this statistic. So, 1 in 4 kids either deal with verbal bullying, physical bullying, cyberbullying, any of those different types. Though verbal bullying is the most common type of bullying and includes spreading rumors, yelling obscenities, or other derogatory terms, though cyberbullying is becoming the most prevalent form of bullying in teens, with about 80% of all high school students encountering it in some fashion. And when we talk about cyberbullying, that means either sending rude text messages, phone calls, like nasty messages on Facebook, Instagram, that type of a thing. And it's incredibly increasing, especially in our recent like digital age. Bullying in adolescence can be linked to a decreased academic achievement, participation in risky behaviors such as drug abuse, unprotected sex, gambling, and suicide or suicidal thoughts, and in extreme cases, school shootings. So, bullying has some pretty nasty side effects. Depending on the severity, can kind of be the type of outcome, but usually there's bad outcomes for both the bully and the victim. There's lots of like mental and emotional kind of things that they have to go through, and they deal with it often. And sometimes it might not be prevalent while they're kind of going through the abuse or the bullying, but it usually shows up sometime later in life. So it's not a very fun thing to deal with. Okay. So, like I said, today I wanted to talk about bullying intervention and more importantly, positive intervention as a solution and kind of what the different types of positive intervention might be. So, in order for students to have the ability to learn and process new information, they must first feel safe in the environment. So, a lot of us know we learned about our students' hierarchy of needs, and really safety in the classroom is a huge one. Without a student feeling safe or secure in their room from the teachers or their peers, they're going to have a really difficult time processing information. They're going to be on high alert. Is my bully around? Are bad things going to happen to me? And they're not going to be focused on what we're teaching. Though despite the recognition of the scope of the problem, 85% of bullying cases still go without intervention or efforts from the school to stop the bullying from taking place. So 85% of recorded bullying incidents, whether that be cyberbullying, verbal bullying, or physical bullying, go pretty much undealt with. Maybe just it's okay, you'll be fine, or oh, they're just being mean, don't worry about them. That's a huge number, 85%. So, this may be due to the fact that a variety of bullying programs have generated mixed results, with some actually increasing bullying behaviors. So, sometimes teachers or maybe administrators feel that it's better to not deal with the bullying because it can increase the aggressive behavior. And don't worry, we'll kind of talk about that later. Schools continue to need guidance on which programs to implement, as well as strategies for integrating their bullying prevention work along with other school improvement efforts. So we've got that schools need guidance. They need some help. What's the best thing to do? Because in a lot of situations when it comes to bullying, there isn't always a one size fits all solution, but we might get to talk about one that works quite well. So, positive behavior intervention support, or PBIS, is typically a successful intervention strategy within a variety of schools. While other intervention strategies such as zero tolerance policies, one-day school assemblies, and peer-led programs tend to have a more negative effect within the scope of bullying prevention. So just from that alone, there's a lot of strategies that kind of don't work or lead to increasing bullying behavior, with not very many that often do. Bullying is a tough topic and it's tough to combat, especially since every school and every kind of situation is really different, and your bully and your victim mentality can be a wide range. So the one that I want to focus on today is positive behavior intervention support, or PBIS. To me, this seems to be like a really great intervention, and I've done a lot of research on it and I found quite a few things. So PBIS is a proactive approach designed to reduce student problem behavior, promote student success, and change the overall climate of the school by focusing on redesigning the school environment to have a more positive atmosphere, a positive-based atmosphere. So the way that PBIS works is it's not necessarily just focusing on one student or maybe one conflict, but it's really about creating a positive environment as a whole for the school. This is a school-wide action and the whole school has to be a part of it. So creating a positive school environment works to discourage bullying by establishing positive behavior norms and increase positive teacher or administrator interactions. PBIS uses a method of ongoing data collection efforts to help identify where, when, and for whom behavior problems like bullying are occurring. So that's kind of one of the important factors of PBIS is it's an ongoing progression or an ongoing program. They're constantly collecting data as the school itself is constantly collecting data. And things like where bullying is happening, what situations are leading up to it, kind of is there a certain spot of the school that's making it worse, a age group that's maybe making it worse. So really to make this sort of intervention work, there's a lot of data collection that goes into it. And they're constantly changing and kind of morphing their model to fit the school's best needs, those constantly changing needs as well. Because if you think about it, when you have a school, you get new kids kind of moving around or changing things every year. So your behavior and kind of what your norms are has to change. PBIS focuses on using a multi-tier format and a school-wide approach to implement these interventions. So when it comes down to PBIS, you basically have 3 tiers. You have your bottom tier, which is kind of solves about 80% of the behavioral problems. This is tier 1. It is a school-wide intervention for all learners to prevent behavioral challenges. So this is creating norms for the school as a whole, or kind of creating behavior expectations, social skill instructions, active supervision and engagement. So you have teachers that are posted up, they're always supervising. This is the school-wide action of kind of setting these norms and setting these expectations for kids to know and to understand. Then you have tier 2 of our chart here, or a PBIS kind of model. And tier 2 is for those students or maybe groups or whatnot that aren't so much following along with those school norms. Either they're having difficulty and whatnot. So tier 2 is specialized interventions for learners who are at risk for academic or social failure due to behavioral challenges. So to combat this, they'll do check-ins and check-outs. So each day, maybe the student has to check in with each teacher and kind of show on a piece of paper how their day went and if they followed those behavioral actions. They usually do social skill groups, small group counseling, and kind of they work a little bit more with that student or that circle of student to do kind of conflict resolution. So we have tier 1, which is school-wide, and then we have tier 2, which deals with those students who kind of need a little bit more help. And that's about 15% on tier 2. Lastly, we have tier 3, and tier 3 is kind of our top of the line. This is really focused on individual intervention for students with intensive and chronic behavior problems. So these students, regardless of the school norms, regardless of kind of how they work, they're just not following along. They're not able to follow it. And when you have this, it's about 5% of students that really have a difficult time with behavior. The biggest focus with this is having individual therapy. Like they're working with that student, they're finding out what's the problem. They're also doing like behavioral assessments to see like what type of behavior they're occurring most often, where the behavior is happening. They typically also assign a behavioral intervention plan to show kind of what the student truly needs and where are we going wrong, what they truly need to be doing. They have wraparound support, like they have their family involved, the teachers involved, all of that. So it really works. It's a great tier. You start with school wide and you kind of work down on those cases individually. But I think the biggest fact is setting an expectation for the entire school and getting everybody involved. The other thing about PBIS is it really, like I said, it's school wide. So it's not putting all of this pressure on just like teachers to do something. They already have a pretty intense job. And so this really works to kind of lighten that load and make it so everybody has to meet this expectation, and it's not such like it's not frowned upon to like step out and say, hey, like something's kind of up, I think we should talk about this. It's planned, it works together. So overall, there is a growing body of research demonstrating the effectiveness of PBIS interventions in reducing challenging behavior. This one, I think one of the stats I found said that it's about 75% effective depending on what type of school it is and kind of where it's at, when it's like installed correctly and teachers and like the administrators are really working together on it. So when a plan is really made, when they're really set and they have like this list in place and they really follow their tier that they set, it has a pretty high success rate and it works quite well. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about is intervention that has negative effects, because we're looking at basically is should we intervene or should we not intervene? So we've talked about our positive one and how that one works and how it really works for teachers and students, but now I kind of want to talk about a few things of intervention that maybe have some negative effects. So, given the complex nature of bullying, there are some strategies that have been shown to be ineffective or potentially harmful for students and lead to an overall increase in bullying behavior as a result. Studies on youth violence and delinquency prevention suggest that peer led programs, so that means like either maybe some older students or like a group of students that kind of wants to take this on, but they are peers working. Peer-led programs in which group children who bully together may actually reinforce their aggressive behaviors and result in higher rates of bullying. So what that means is when you have a peer-led group and you get all of the bullies together to maybe talk about them or like talk about, modifying their behavior, but we have all these bullies together, that they're actually shown to increase their aggressive behavior. And one of the reasons for this is the fact that bullies end up learning from each other and increasing their aggressive behavior on the things that they have learned from the other bullies. So it's not a good idea to take all of your bullies and group them together. That doesn't really work on like preventing. It actually typically increases bullying in the schoolyard. There's also little evidence that show brief assemblies or one-day awareness events to have any significant impact on changing a school environment or having an impact on the frequency of bullying behavior. So what this means is sometimes schools, they might not really want to deal with it so much, or they might not know how to deal with it so much. So they kind of have like one-day assemblies that are like, we have no bullying, or like, are really big, and they just are kind of like almost a scare tactic type of assembly. They typically don't have any real effects on bullying in the play yard or at school in the classrooms and whatnot. Children kind of sit there, they watch them, they maybe participate, but after that, there's not much enforcement and they don't have much to do with it. It's kind of brushed off their shoulders at the end of the day. Additionally, zero tolerance policies, which mandate suspension for children who bully, have traditionally been a common response to bullying. So I'm sure a lot of you work at schools that maybe have zero tolerance policies on bullying, which means that regardless of what happens, any event that's reported, like the student is automatically suspended or expelled, there's zero tolerance. There's no excuses, nothing for it. And though the use of this policy often results, so the biggest part of it is that this sort of intervention or this policy doesn't typically work because of the policy, a lot of bullying incidents go unreported. Like teachers don't want to report them, or other students don't want to say anything because they feel that in the end result, the punishment is too harsh. So, like a teacher might witness some bullying. It might be like a small form, like maybe a few vulnerable words and whatnot, but they end up not reporting it to their superiors because they think that expulsion or suspension is too heavy. Like the crime or the punishment doesn't fit the crime in a way. So why deal with it? I don't think this student should get suspended. So a zero tolerance policy, it typically doesn't really work in the end because, like I said, a lot of things go unreported and then they become unsolved, right? So that goes back to our 85% of cases. Once they're reported, nothing happens with them. And that's kind of because why? Sometimes schools have things set up where their punishment is so much more severe than a teacher or maybe like a yard attendant thinks that it should be. And so they don't want to tell anybody because it's going to hurt the kid in the end. The other thing about the zero tolerance policy is that if the school member or school district isn't careful, suspending a kid for bullying can almost become a reward. A lot of the time, bullies don't typically want to come to school. Maybe they have like home issues or whatnot, but school probably isn't really their favorite place to begin with. And so knowing that if they bully another kid, they get to go home and have the next week off and sit at home and play their video games, it'd be almost kind of like an incentive to bully somebody else. So zero tolerance, it's not really the best thing to do. All right, so down for my conclusions. The success of a specific intervention strategy may vary. Though national evaluations show that the most successful schools in reducing bullying are those that do the most work. They create a plan, they get parents involved, teachers involved, the community involved, everybody's on the same page, and there's a plan for every step of the way. You start and you have this plan and you have people that are like ready and they all believe in the same thing. We're all moving forward, we're all giving the same information, we all have the same standards and expectations. And if those aren't met, then we have a stepwise process to kind of fix that and help those groups or help those individuals that are struggling. These schools typically focus on a school-wide platform that involves teachers, administrators, parents, and the community as a whole to combat the bullying. The available research suggests that PBIS is a promising strategy for addressing issues related to student discipline, school climate, and bullying. This is due to the idea that a positive school-wide approach to student behavior management has been shown to improve the school environment and will in turn likely reduce bullying. So when you have this school-wide policy, everyone's kind of following along. They're believing in it and they're buying in. And it makes a safe learning environment for the student. They're not having to watch the back for a bully or think of things, watching and making sure nobody's going to hurt them or say rude things, because that's not part of the norms that the school has set aside. And when you have an entire school believing in a set of norms or a set of expectations, those that kind of go without them or are mean or rude are kind of the outcasts in these situations, right? They usually don't get any of the rewards that go along, or they have to go and do these like therapy groups or behavior interventions, those type of things. So it's not the norm to be kind of the bad behavior student and do the bullying. Though implementing the PBIS strategy can often be much easier said than done, as educators may encounter some challenges implementing the strategy without overloading or exceeding the team's resources. So with PBIS, it is a big strategy. It takes a lot of planning and it takes a lot of effort from teachers and administrators. Everybody kind of has to be on board. They have to hold and keep the expectations set. So it does take quite a bit of effort to run PBIS. Though PBIS is shown to work in many situations, there is still more research to be done on other bullying and behavioral intervention strategies. Certain strategies may work better in extreme behavioral situations where the PBIS strategy might not be enough, while other strategies can do more harm than good. When it comes to bullying, every school and every situation is really different. And like I said, there's no one-size-fits-all case to bullying. So more research does need to be done. More trials need to, or more schools need to test out different behavioral strategies or different behavior intervention strategies to see what works. But typically a school kind of grabs onto one intervention strategy and kind of holds to it without really trying different things, or if it truly works or not. So pretty much we've talked about different intervention strategies in the school spectrum, and I hope that maybe it might lead you to kind of look into some things more, or maybe look at your school and how they kind of what their bullying policy is. But overall, it was a pretty interesting topic for me, and I hope that everybody has a fun night.